The tension in Reasonable Doubt Season 3 has been building like a storm, and Episode 3 is about to be the lightning strike. Secrets are unraveling, trust is crumbling, and every character seems to be walking on a thin line that could break at any second. If you thought the last episode left you with questions, Episode 3 is designed to shake everything you think you know. This isn't just another chapter, it's the turning point that will decide who survives the pressure and who gets destroyed by it. The story so far has kept viewers glued to the screen because nothing is predictable. Episode 2 closed on a cliffhanger that raised more questions than answers, leaving fans desperate to know what comes next. Episode 3 steps right into that tension and refuses to let it go. From the very first minutes, the atmosphere feels heavier. You sense that every choice the characters make will echo far into the season. This episode isn't about simple drama, it's about exposing the cracks in relationships, in loyalty, and even in justice itself. One of the first things to expect in Episode 3 is how the characters carry the weight of what happened before. Every decision made in the earlier episodes has a price, and now, that price is coming due. Viewers will notice how subtle looks, unspoken words, and half-finished sentences reveal more than loud arguments ever could. The writing pushes us to see the truth hiding underneath the surface. For fans who enjoy picking apart details and guessing what's really going on, Episode 3 will feel like a puzzle scattered across the screen. Every scene carries a clue, and nothing is shown without a reason. Another important thing about this episode is the way it challenges trust. Trust has been fragile from the start of the season, but here it begins to collapse in shocking ways. The lines between ally and enemy blur so quickly that you'll second-guess every smile, every handshake, and every promise. When two characters share a quiet moment, you're left wondering if it's genuine or a setup for betrayal. This is where the show really shines. It makes the audience feel the same paranoia as the characters. Nobody is safe, not emotionally and not physically. At the same time, Episode 3 brings out the human side of the conflict. These aren't just players in a legal drama, they are people caught between ambition, fear, and the desire to protect themselves. The writing allows us to see their vulnerabilities, their guilt, and even their silent desperation. That balance between power and weakness is what makes the tension so gripping. Just when you think a character has gained control, something happens to remind you how unstable their world really is. Episode 3 shows us that power is always temporary, and control can vanish in a single conversation. The pacing of this episode is another factor that keeps it unforgettable. It doesn't rush, but it never drags either. Instead, it builds suspense like a heartbeat that keeps getting faster and faster. Every scene feels like it's leading to a reveal, a confrontation, or a collapse. The audience is never allowed to feel comfortable. That nervous edge, the sense that something could explode at any second, is what makes Episode 3 a standout. It's not just what happens, but how the show forces you to anticipate it. By the time Episode 3 moves into its second act, you realize that this is more than just continuation, it's escalation. Conflicts that seemed minor before become major battles. Secrets that were hinted at suddenly come closer to the surface. And through it all, the show keeps you asking, who can actually be trusted, and who is about to show their true colors? That central question is what gives this episode its fire. What makes Episode 3 stand apart from the first two is the way it forces every character to confront the consequences of their past actions. No one escapes the ripple effect here. The smallest lie, the quietest betrayal, or even a single choice made in anger begins to unravel in ways that nobody expected. This is where the series proves that it isn't just about courtrooms or strategy, it's about how fragile human lives become when the truth refuses to stay buried. One of the most striking aspects of this episode is the slow unraveling of confidence. Characters who once carried themselves with certainty now find their voices shaking, their eyes darting nervously, and their confidence slipping like sand through their fingers. This vulnerability doesn't just make the drama richer, it makes the danger feel more real. When people who once seemed unshakable begin to falter, the audience knows that something huge is looming in the shadows. The brilliance of the writing lies in showing us that collapse doesn't always come with explosions, it comes quietly. In whispers, in silences, and in the weight of secrets too heavy to carry. Episode 3 also intensifies the clash between personal lives and professional duties. Characters who thought they could keep those worlds apart are confronted with the brutal truth that emotions, loyalty, and family cannot be locked away. What they do in the courtroom or in negotiations has a direct cost in their homes, their relationships, and their mental health. This constant balancing act builds an emotional storm. Viewers will notice how personal sacrifices bleed into professional ones. and how professional battles leave scars that no apology can heal. This duality makes the drama painfully relatable because it reminds us of the real world, how decisions at work often ripple into our private lives. Trust, already fragile, takes on an even sharper edge in this episode. It is not just about who is lying, but about who believes they are telling the truth. The clever writing plays with perception. One character may think they are protecting someone, while to another, that same action looks like betrayal. The audience is placed in the middle of this confusion, feeling the tension of both sides without knowing who to root for. That tension is intentional, because reasonable doubt thrives on the gray areas where right and wrong no longer exist. Another unique layer that episode 3 adds is the sense of looming danger beyond the immediate drama. It's not just about conflicts we see, it's about the forces we don't see yet. The atmosphere suggests that bigger players, unseen enemies, or deeper secrets are waiting to emerge. This invisible presence creates suspense that lingers even in quieter scenes. You might be watching two characters share coffee, but in the back of your mind, you know something dangerous is creeping closer. That psychological tension keeps the audience leaning forward, never fully relaxed. The episode also uses silence and pacing as weapons. In previous episodes, arguments and confrontations dominated the screen. Here, silence speaks louder. A pause in dialogue, a stare that lasts 1 second too long, a door that closes without explanation. These moments hit harder than shouting matches. The directors know how to use quiet tension to make the audience uneasy. Episode 3 teaches us that sometimes the most terrifying sound is the absence of words. What makes all of this unforgettable is the way it pushes viewers to question their own instincts. The audience will constantly ask themselves, if I were in that situation, would I lie to survive? Would I betray someone I love to protect myself? Would I take the risk of trusting someone who already broke my heart once? By weaving these questions into the story, the episode turns from simple entertainment into a mirror. We are not just watching the characters, we are measuring ourselves against them. That's why the suspense feels so personal, and why the drama cuts so deep. By the time episode 3 reaches its midpoint, you realize that the stakes are no longer about winning or losing, they're about survival. Survival of reputation, survival of relationships, and sometimes even survival itself. What began as a show about navigating tricky situations now feels like a battle for who can withstand the crushing weight of doubt. And as the camera lingers on characters who seem ready to shatter, one truth becomes clear. Episode 3 is where the real war begins. If the first 2 episodes of the season were about building the walls of suspicion, then episode 3 is where those walls begin to crack and the collapse feels unstoppable. This is the chapter where the tension doesn't just rise, it explodes into moments that leave you speechless. You know those scenes that stay with you long after the credits roll. Episode 3 has them, and they don't rely on special effects or loud spectacle. They rely on betrayal, on honesty twisted into weapons, and on the kind of choices that turn allies into enemies in the span of a heartbeat. The most powerful element of this episode is its unpredictability. Just when you think you've figured out where the story is going, the floor falls from under you. A character you thought was safe makes a choice so reckless it changes everything. Another character, who has been quiet in the background, suddenly takes center stage in a way that makes you see them completely differently. This shift of power and perspective is one of the reasons reasonable doubt keeps its audience hooked. It doesn't let you settle. Every assumption you had after episode 2 is tested, broken, and rearranged into something more dangerous. Episode 3 also sharpens the theme of betrayal. Betrayal doesn't always arrive in dramatic speeches. Sometimes it comes in the form of silence, of not stepping in when you should, of protecting the wrong person at the wrong time. The writing in this episode captures that perfectly. A character might believe they are saving themselves, but to someone else, that same act feels like a knife in the back. And because betrayal here doesn't come with clear warning signs, the audience feels the sting at the same time as the characters. It's gut-wrenching because it feels personal, almost as if we've been betrayed too. One unique twist in this episode is how it blends confrontation with restraint. There are arguments, yes, but the truly shocking moments come when emotions are controlled, not released. Imagine 2 characters sitting across from each other, speaking calmly, but every word is like a dagger. The viewer senses the violence under the surface, waiting to erupt, but the dialogue keeps it restrained. That sharp contrast, rage hidden under politeness, is far more unsettling than yelling ever could be. It leaves the audience squirming, because the blow we expect never lands, which makes us dread when it finally will. Another unforgettable layer in episode 3 is the way it deals with truth. In this world, the truth isn't a gift, it's a weapon. A confession can destroy a friendship. A revelation can put someone's career at risk. A piece of honesty, spoken at the wrong time, can become the most dangerous move of all. Episode 3 proves that sometimes the truth is harder to survive than lies. Characters who thought they wanted honesty are forced to face the cost of actually hearing it. That dynamic forces the audience to question, do we really want the truth, or do we want comfort? The pacing of this episode also keeps the shocks coming. It doesn't throw everything at the audience at once. Instead, it gives us small explosions, each one shaking the ground a little more, until the big reveal finally erupts. By the time the most shocking moment arrives, the audience has been conditioned to expect chaos. Yet it still feels like a punch in the gut. That's the magic of the storytelling. Here it manages to surprise us even when we're bracing for impact. At the heart of all these twists is the idea of consequence. Every action in episode 3 has a ripple effect. A single choice sets off a chain of events that pulls other characters into the storm. What makes this episode so unique is how those ripples don't just affect the immediate story, they set the stage for the rest of the season. Watching episode 3 feels like watching dominoes fall. Except you don't know how many pieces are lined up or where the chain will end. Perhaps the most haunting part of this episode is how it ends. Without giving away details, the final moments are not loud, not chaotic, but chillingly quiet. The kind of ending that makes you sit in silence, replaying everything in your mind. Realizing how carefully it was all built up to this point. It's not about shock value for its own sake, it's about pulling the rug out from under you and forcing you to see the story in a new, darker light. Episode 3 doesn't just move the story forward, it transforms it. From here on out, nothing is the same. Episode 3 doesn't simply leave us with answers, it leaves us with wounds that are not easily healed. This is where the storytelling proves its power. But even when the screen goes dark, the questions it plants continue to echo in your mind. The beauty of this episode lies in what it dares to withhold. It doesn't hand us every truth neatly wrapped up. Instead, it hands us fragments, half-truths, and puzzles that demand our attention long after the credits roll. And that is exactly what makes the build-up to episode 4 feel so terrifying. We are stepping into unknown territory, guided only by suspicion and doubt. One of the most fascinating parts of this episode is how it reshapes our view of the characters. People we thought were victims may not be as innocent as they seemed. Those who appeared ruthless may reveal pieces of vulnerability that make us reconsider them entirely. The brilliance of the writing is that it never locks anyone into a single role. No character is purely good or purely evil, they are layered, messy, and human. And it's this unpredictability that makes fans argue endlessly about what might happen next. You cannot put these characters in neat boxes, because every episode tears those boxes apart. Episode 3 also leaves us on the edge of a cliff emotionally. It challenges the audience to question where their loyalty lies. Do you stand with the person who took a risk to protect themselves, even if it meant betraying someone else? Or do you stand with the one who was wronged, even though their own actions haven't been entirely clean either? This moral tug-of-war is the genius of reasonable doubt. It forces you to see the gray areas in human behavior. The uncomfortable truth that sometimes survival means hurting someone you love. By pulling the audience into this space, the show doesn't just entertain, it demands participation. What's especially unique about episode 3 is how it uses uncertainty as a character in itself. Doubt isn't just a theme, it's alive. It lingers in every conversation, and it poisons every moment of calm. Even when nothing explosive is happening on screen, you feel the weight of that doubt pressing down. It becomes a question mark over every smile, every gesture, every promise. This sense of unease is what makes the episode unforgettable. It's not about what you see, it's about what you can't see. The possibilities that may be lurking just outside the frame. Looking ahead, the fallout from episode 3 is bound to reshape the entire season. Trust has been broken in ways that can't be repaired overnight. Secrets have come closer to the surface, and we know the show will not leave them buried for long. Expect episode 4 and beyond to be more intense, because episode 3 is not just a chapter, it is the fuse being lit. The real explosion is still coming, and every viewer knows it. That anticipation is what makes the waiting so painful, and yet so thrilling. The final impression episode 3 leaves is one of silence, the kind that follows a storm. Characters are left staring into the distance, carrying the weight of what they've done, or what has been done to them. The silence is heavy, not peaceful. It's the silence of dread, the calm before the next wave of chaos. And as viewers, we share in that silence because we know too much to relax, but not enough to predict what's coming with certainty. For fans, this is the moment where speculation runs wild. Who will reveal the next secret? Who will pay the price for their betrayal? And most importantly, who will have the strength to face the fallout? These are not small questions, and they are not the kind of questions with easy answers. That's why the show works. It refuses to let us feel safe. It refuses to let us think we've figured it all out. It thrives on the power of reasonable doubt, and episode 3 delivers it in full force. So as we step away from this episode, the challenge for the audience is clear. Don't just watch, pay attention. Look at the details, the pauses, the contradictions. Ask yourself what's real and what's performance. Because in reasonable doubt, nothing is ever shown by accident, and the smallest detail may end up being the key to everything. Episode 3 reminds us that survival in this world isn't about strength alone, it's about perception, timing, and the courage to face truths that most people would run from. And maybe that's the greatest question of all. When the truth finally comes out, who will still be standing?